Today we're talking about the state that wants to make gender crime a new felony offense, adult trans healthcare bans, and Republicans mandating genital inspections for school children on this episode of Huge News. I'm your host, Ty Turner, reporting another record year for anti-trans bills. Just a few months in, and we've already surpassed last year's total, making 2025 the third year in a row that has happened. And as expected, it is not just the number of bills that is escalating, but also the scope of the bills, the audacity of the bills. This new wave of anti-trans legislation is honestly unbelievable. I didn't think I had high hopes for us right now in this situation, but apparently I did, because it's worse than I was expecting. For our first story, we're heading over to the state that I definitely won't mess with, nor will I be traveling to in the foreseeable future. It is Texas, and they are trying to create gender fraud as a new type of felony offense. They literally said, "F it, being trans is illegal now." So here's the bill, an act relating to creating the criminal offense of gender identity fraud. A penal code? Subchapter D? That feels intentional. A person commits an offense if the person knowingly makes a false or misleading verbal or written statement to a governmental entity or the person's employer by identifying the person's biological sex as the opposite of the biological sex assigned to the person at birth. An offense under this section is a state jail felony. State jail felonies in Texas are punishable by up to 2 years in jail and a fine of up to $10,000. Now, the obvious application for this is when it comes to your gender markers. Anyone who previously had their gender marker legally updated would now be committing fraud. And that includes trans people traveling through Texas, so my ID would be considered fraudulent. But there's a lot more going on here. All right, there is a reason that people are referring to this as being a crime of simply identifying as transgender. First of all, the Texas AG Ken Paxton has already mandated that all gender markers be reverted to reflect sex at birth, and any documents with an updated gender marker are considered void. So when you consider that, along with Texas's other anti-trans laws and just the verbiage of this bill, we can see the implications go far beyond gender markers. For example, Texas enforces sex-based definitions for gendered terms, so words like man, woman, boy, girl, mother, father also legally refer to a person's biological sex. So if a trans man were to file a police report for his missing child and refers to himself as the child's father, that would be fraud. Because in Texas, the legal definition of father means a parent of the male sex. So there is an endless list of ways that just interacting with a cop or a judge or any government employee while being trans could be considered fraud, especially given the ambiguity of misleading verbal statement. Wait, if you get clocked by a cop and they ask you your pronouns, is that entrapment? Also, the person's employer is crazy. Like, you could already be fired in Texas for being trans. There are no protections anymore. But that's not enough. Now they want to charge you with a felony for being stealth at work. Up next, states are going after gender-affirming care for adults. And we're all shocked. No one thought they'd do that, you know? Now, meanwhile, a new study just confirmed what every trans person has been saying forever, that hormone therapy reduces depression in trans adults. The study analyzed data from over 3,500 patients over 4 years and found that those receiving hormone therapy had significantly better mental health outcomes. And you know, the right loves to talk about trans people. Conservative commentators make more trans content than I do, so I'm sure they have tons to say. I bet they're all buzzing about this study. Of course not. When we look at the right-wing media coverage of this story, it's crickets. There's one article that has been reposted to a couple of local news sites. So your grandparents won't be hearing about this on Fox News the way they would if, say, a trans woman was caught jaywalking in Boise, Idaho. Maybe if they printed the study on a can of Bud Light and sent it to Amon Khalif, the conservatives would talk about it. I don't know. What I do know is that thanks to our sponsor Ground News, we can see exactly how this story is being covered from all angles. Because the Ground News website and app gathers related articles from all over the world and compares coverage to give you full transparency while you stay informed on important issues. We can see the biased distribution of news sources, the factuality rating of each source, and who owns them, be it an individual, a corporation, the government, etc. This context is crucial right now, especially when it comes to trans issues. Having this all laid out means that you don't have to sift through all the misinformation and transphobia to keep up with what's going on. And that's why I love Ground News, because I can stay informed without getting overwhelmed, and you can too. Ground News is giving my viewers 40% off the unlimited access Vantage plan, the same one that I use. So click my link in the description or head on over to groundnews.com/Turner to subscribe. So yes, states are coming after trans healthcare for adults, despite the reality that it hurts no one and helps a lot of people. There are at least 10 states so far where bills have been introduced to cut off public funding for gender-affirming care for adults. So for example, in Georgia, just this week, Georgia Republican senators approved legislation that would prohibit state insurance plans from covering those services. Along with Medicaid enrollees and incarcerated adults, the bill would affect employees enrolled in state insurance plans and people enrolled in public university health plans. States that already ban access to care for youth are taking it a step further and enacting policies that impact adults. Yes, they impact a lot of adults, man. The bill, in no uncertain terms, makes clear that you cannot use state taxpayer dollars in any form to pay for transgender surgeries. Georgia Republican State Senator Blake Tillery, who introduced the legislation, said on the Senate floor. Isn't it kind of crazy to just kind of pick a certain medical treatment that you don't like and decide that nobody can get it? It doesn't say, if you're an adult, you can't have transgender care, Tillery said. But that's what it does. Like, if the only option you're giving people is to just be rich and pay for it yourself, you're not actually giving them an option. This is literally a healthcare ban for a huge number of people. And they're using the taxpayer dollars as a new excuse. They're moving the goalpost. First it was protecting children, now it's protecting the taxpayers. And it's not going to stop. It will continue to evolve. There will always be a reason that they pretend it's okay to attack trans people. And we're already seeing that, okay? So that's just one way that states are going about banning trans health care for adults. But then, of course, you got Texas, where everything's bigger, including the brain rot. Texas House bill could ban gender-affirming care for transgender adults. HB 3399 appears to build off of 2023's Senate Bill 14, a ban on transition-related medical care and medications for minors. The new bill would simply replace child in the specific state law with person, expanding the existing ban to adults. We hate to see it, we've been new, we are fucked, and nobody seems to care.
We are fucked, and nobody seems to care!
Up next, the West Virginia bill mandating child genital inspections. AKA the Riley Gaines Act. Riley Gaines, who is literally the spokesperson on the Protecting Women and Children official federal government webpage. This is her act. That's great. SB 456, it's your standard full-scope trans ban, making everything sex-based and having that be determined by your genitals at birth. The problem with these bills is always enforcement. Who's checking? So when it comes to public schools, with kids as young as 4 years old, all being categorized based on their genitals, how do Republicans propose we enforce this? While the original version of the bill allowed for anyone to legally be allowed to inspect a child's genitals to confirm their sex without a parent's consent. Your kid's t-ball coach, maybe he wants to take a look, sure, he doesn't have to ask. Middle school janitor cleaning the bathroom when a student walks in, completely within their legal rights to lock the door, say, drop your pants and spread them, it's examination time. Gotta make sure there's no creeps coming into the bathroom and making students uncomfortable. Any adult could examine any kid without anyone's consent, and there would be no legal recourse. Now you might think this is just a bad faith interpretation of the bill, that just because the bill would allow this doesn't mean that Republicans are intentionally including it. But when this enforcement issue was pointed out and an amendment was proposed to not allow genital inspections, they voted it down. They explicitly chose to include legalized child molestation in this bill. That's what it is. Obviously, people weren't stoked about that. I think maybe they realized they were saying the quiet part a little too loud. And an alternate amendment was passed to only allow a treating healthcare provider to visually or physically examine a minor child for the purpose of verifying their biological sex without the consent of the child's parent, guardian, or custodian. So just the nurse. What are we even talking about? But then a third and final amendment was made saying that this bill does not authorize an examination of a minor for purposes of determining the minor's sex. This version passed, thankfully, but there are no such protections for adults, which means all of the other people affected by this bill can be examined and inspected down there to confirm their biological sex. You know what? Let's leave on a slightly more positive note. Along the same lines, this comes from Aaron in the Morning. Minnesota anti-trans state senator arrested for soliciting a minor. Right. Republican Minnesota State Senator Justin Eichhorn, known for authorizing anti-trans legislation and proposing a bill that would classify hatred of Donald Trump as a mental illness. Oh yes, Trump derangement syndrome. New mental illness just dropped. If you don't love Trump, you're crazy. Therefore, you got all these restrictions. You can't buy a gun. You can't buy a gun if you don't love Trump. Because you must be crazy. So he was arrested yesterday for allegedly attempting to solicit sex from a minor. I'm shocked. According to a statement from the Bloomington Police Report, Eichhorn believed he was arranging to meet a 17-year-old girl for prostitution, but was actually communicating with law enforcement officers. We would like for you to take a seat, please. Take a seat, sir. We need to have a talk. Oh my God. Imagine being a government official and falling for this To Catch a Predator-ass situation. Like, y'all are just so gross and dumb. You're so gross and dumb. What are you doing? So he's getting felony charges. I hope they lock him up and throw away the key. So there we have another in a long list of examples of the Protect the Children from Trans People crowd actively preying on children. Well, there you have it. That's the show, folks. Check out the Huge News merch over on SkeletiTyTurner.com. All right, this has been Huge News. I'm your host, Ty Turner, wishing you a wonderful night. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, stay huge.